This is Spencer WS here with a comprehensive card review for the Blackbeard. There will be some spoilers of the uncommon and rare cards, just letting you know. I want to comment on some of the balance and the theory behind some of these cards in order to give elaborate feedback on what could be improved with this class. So first I want to take Beat Up, for example. I like having this kind of card, but right off the bat, it's a card that's too good for the class. Maybe the class is supposed to be overpowered, in which case this is the kind of thing you want. It deals 2 hits of damage and applies 1 vulnerable for 1 energy. And its upgrade is way better. It applies 2 vulnerable for 2 hits of 5. That's comprehensively better than Ironclad's bash attack. So that's something to consider right off the bat. Cards like that. They also the Blackbeard also has the Intimidating Strike, which applies to weak. It's kind of like, it's actually a worse version of the Silence card. So I didn't take too much issue with that. I hardly use this card. There's almost no need to. So I think one thing I don't really like about the Blackbeard class is that there seems to be an effort to include both weak and vulnerable in large quantities in this deck, and I think that's a little bit too even-handed. I think this class should maybe major in one. For instance, the Jolly Roger, apply weak to all enemies, which is way overpowered. Just way overpowered. 3 weak for an unupgraded 1 energy card for all enemies is way overpowered. But even worse, in my opinion, far worse, is Terror of the Seas. Does the same thing. And also the upgrades, I think, are kind of silly. You don't need more than 3, maybe 4 vulnerable on enemies. I would advise that these numbers be adjusted to 1 vulnerable on all enemies and 2 vulnerable, or 2 or 3. I kind of see the logic there because this card does exhaust. But that's it depends on how overpowered the creator intends this class to be. So that's right off the bat, we have a good supply of weak and vulnerable compared to other characters. Vulnerable being the far better skill because of all the weapons and such that we have to deal with. Why bother with making your opponent weak when you can put resistance on yourself and block damage instead? So let's address the resistance thing for a moment. Everything kind of bleeds into everything else here, so I'm going to go one issue at a time and then segue into a different issue. This is extremely powerful. Resistance is a very, very powerful card. It is, a very powerful mechanic. It is at least twice as good as dexterity. If the enemy is attacking multiple times, it is that many times better than dexterity because you don't have to have a block card for it to work. The only exception perhaps is the heart, because you take, and maybe some other enemies, but most importantly the heart, because you take damage for playing cards. But it doesn't matter if you're able to block the heart's multi-hit attack and consistently have it do 0 damage with it. So this is, it doesn't look like it, but cards that give resistance like this, are extremely overpowered. I would definitely lower this to 1 resistance and have it upgrade to 2. And for 1 energy, that's still pretty good. But you know, if you increase the energy cost, is a little bit hard to appreciate. Maybe you could bring this up to 2 energy and keep the 2 resistance here and have it upgrade to 3. That seems more reasonable. Besides that, there's this which is just as good. It's got the same resistance thing going on. It's just way good for the price. And where's the other one? This one is insane. It is absolutely insane. And the reason why is because losing one resistance each turn is a debuff. And this character can get rid of its debuffs instantly. That's why this card is massively broken with this character. Speaking of which, here's another source of resistance. This card. Gain 2 resistance at the start of the next turn, lose 2 resistance. That second part is a debuff and can be removed. So let me segue from there to, in my opinion, the most absolutely ridiculous element of this character in terms of balance, this card. So this is a common card that removes all of your debuffs, exhausts, and draws a card. Okay? A common card that removes all of your debuffs. Removing all of your debuffs is such a powerful ability that in the vanilla game, there's only one way to do it, and that is with the orange pellets. It is a uncommon relic, I think. At least by the price, it seems uncommon. And in order to make the orange pellets work, you have to spend a power... You have to play a power, attack, and skill in one turn. So that's just an illustration of how powerful it is to remove all of your debuffs. Even without all the ways that the Blackbeard debuffs itself, removing all of one's debuffs is way powerful. Way powerful. So if you have the Chosen's Curse on you, if you have weak, vulnerable, particularly vulnerable, if you're fighting the heart and in the first turn it puts all those status conditions on you at once, if you have a what's it called? I can't remember what the potion's names are, but like a strength potion and dexterity potion that only works for one turn, well, you can remove its wear-off effect. That's a debuff. So you can have the strength and dexterity work for every turn for the battle. Need I say more? I mean, this is the most insanely overpowered common card I've ever seen in any mod. Just to give you an idea, it gets way worse. So here are some of the examples of debuffs you can remove with Pirate's Will. Let's see here. This debuff, at the end of your next turn, you are dealt 6 damage. You can remove that. Gain 3 weak, which makes sense. You can remove that. Lose 2 resistance. You can remove that, except if you've already gained resistance, in which case you can't, which makes this card inferior to some of the other debuffing cards, because if you have positive resistance and you lose 2 resistance, you'll still have positive resistance. It happens right away. I think that's actually a glitch. I think that should be changed to be a consistent mechanic. So that doesn't really work. But what else? There's more. Let's see here. At the start of your turn, lose 2 energy after gaining 2 energy this turn. I haven't actually tested this one, but I think that's a debuff. So you can remove that. What else? Oh, most importantly, this. Vengeful Spirit. You get 1 intangible, but at the end of your next turn, you're dealt 12 damage. You can remove that. It's a debuff. What else? Lose 2 dexterity can be removed unless... I think that's how it works. Yeah, unless you have positive dexterity, which you don't need positive dexterity with this character, not at all. Am I missing any? Oh yes, the infamous one. At the start of each turn, lose 1 resistance. You've got plenty of time to remove that. And then finally, the Undead Form, the newly added card to this mod. At the start of the turn in which you are no longer intangible, you are dealt 30 damage By the way, I don't know what this upgrades to. Oh, that makes sense. I predicted that. That's a debuff. You can remove that. That's ridiculous. There's no way that the class is balanced in the smallest semblance with its ability to remove all debuffs. Scurvy also is a second card that removes all of your debuffs. I think that this ability has been massively underestimated for Slay the Spire in general, but it's been even more exploited by this character. So I'm glad that they made this card uncommon. That's at least somewhat more respectable. I think that this card should remove 2 debuffs, and Pirate's Will should remove 1. And even then, it's kind of absurd. It should not draw you another card. And Scurvy should probably not even heal you at all. That's the way that makes these cards even slightly balanced. That's the way I see it. Okay. I think that's well covered. Let's address the weapons system here. So this is rather powerful because you can decide whether or not it hits all enemies or draws you cards or draws you random cards. That's useful for niche situations, but in general, this is not the best way to hit all enemies. But it's still a powerful weapon. I like this. There's not a whole lot I would propose to change it. In fact, I'm a little unsure how I would change it. The only thing I think that's perhaps too powerful about this card is that you can pick whether this sword hits all enemies each time it's used, whether it draws a card or whether it draws you random cards. If this were split into different cards and this stupid skill, this stupid cutlass was removed from the game, that would be wonderful. Also, these stupid daggers need to go. This is like deck chaff if I have ever seen it. Hardly useful for anything at all. The spear, it's got a purpose, so I guess I'll leave it alone. But I don't like it either, for sure. Okay. Sword stance is pretty much the only reason why you would want more than like 2 or maybe 3 weapons in your deck. And so the chief problem with the weapon mechanic is that all weapons do is increase, they're basically provisional strength. And I don't know how well understood this is because there are some powers and other things at the bottom of this card list that give you strength, which I don't think should be happening for this mod, because weapons are your strength. They're a kind of provisional strength. Problem is that weapons get backed up. So if you have more than if you have at least a few weapons in your deck, the chance that you're gonna play them faster than you can possibly the chance you can play them faster than you can possibly spend their attack damage is very high, and they start becoming a waste of time because you're trying to get through enemies quickly and you're trying to make everything count. I think that having weapons exhaust might be an improvement, even though I know that cannonballs also exhaust, and so that does put a little bit of weight on the exhaust mechanic for this character, but I don't see that as a particular problem. So sword stance is the only reason you should be taking weapons at all. I mean, there's hardly anything good about weapons else. I mean, if you're going to play a weapon, why not just play a standard attack? That guarantees that you're going to get some damage out instead of getting backed up on weapons, which is very annoying. And besides, the best weapon for this character, no contest, is the powder keg, and you want that sucker to be in the front as much as possible, as soon as possible. by the way, of course, it's overpowered. So dealing 15 damage to all enemies and not even attack damage is pretty amazing. Obviously, you can blow up birds with this powder keg really effectively. I was looking at it and looking at its absurd starting damage and its absurd upgrade damage of 20 and wondering what I would do to balance it, to improve it. I think what I would do is really lean more into its gimmick. So make it a 2 durability weapon for a start, and then have it deal 12 damage to all enemies, by the way. But make it a 2 durability weapon so you get more of a sense that you're actually trying to set this thing off, and it's actually not so easy. And then upgrade it to 15. I think that's a good way to do it. Speaking of which, damage to all enemies. Some damage to all enemies is pathetic. I consider this card to be pathetic, but it does have some late game potential. Drawing 2 cards, but already spending 2 energy is kind of rough. Maybe its damage to all enemies is due compensation. I'm not sure. The good thing about this is that it's a source of damage that doesn't exhaust, unlike many of your cannonballs. So maybe I'm being a little bit too theoretical looking at this, but 2 always struck me as pretty steep for a card like this. Even though drawing 2 is good if you have lots of energy, but that's the thing. It already costs a lot of energy to begin with. This card I appreciated. I think this is a good example of how to do a reasonably balanced damage spread. So this is a little less powerful than the Ironclad's. Is it Cleave? I don't know what card, but it's his area attack. I appreciate this because it's actually a little bit underpowered. It suggests that the class isn't excellent at everything, and that makes things more interesting. That makes the class more defined. All of these things that give your weapons extra attack, based on what I have said earlier, are almost always a waste of time. I would not bother with any of these, and they just kind of clutter up the card pool. They're not very good. Oh, I forgot to mention. Speaking of debuff removal, this is your best block in the game. It's absurdly high block. 14 block for 1 energy with a paltry debuff. Even with the debuff, it's a good card. But you can take it off, as I've said before, making this card just so easy to prevent damage. By the way, this I like. This is one of those cards that brings up a few things. Firstly, good portrait. There are some cards in this mod that need to be changed or removed for the sheer fact that they have awful portraits and it makes you bored to play as the Blackbeard. This card does not. It has a fun portrait here, and it deals damage to a random enemy, which is generally not good. This is usually only good for single combat. I would up this to 4 personally, and maybe have it be 2 damage. Really lean into that multiple hit gimmick, and maybe have it upgrade to that. I'm not sure. Yeah, so, but I like it. It's going somewhere. It's interesting. It doesn't just scream overpowered. It screams, It's like a character trait for the class. You have to think about it to figure out what you might do with it. What you can do with it is put a weapon on it, and that makes the damage multiplied. If there were more multi-hits in this class, I think weapons would be taken more seriously. Okay. Fencing is... I just want to raise it as a card that I don't think is good at all. Why would I play this card if I can just give my character strength? And why would I play this card at all? Because I'd have to I have to put a weapon up first. Then I have to play fencing on it, and then expect to be able to use all that attack power from the weapon. But I haven't played my attacks yet. I haven't played any attacks yet. It's unlikely that this would pay off ever if you can even put it on a weapon. Yes, even the spear. Okay. What else? Armor up is not very good for that reason. You should not be stacking up on weapons. Let's see here. Also, speaking of relics that are totally broken, that buried treasure that gives you 20 gold per battle is nuts. It's important to remember that gaining gold is good because you can spend gold, not just because it increases the bonuses of certain cards like this. Yeah, so I didn't like that. Golden Cannonball, I love it. I love Golden Cannonball. Frankly, this I think is this and the Captain's Quarters, I think, are the cards that make the class for me. Like a little fun cannonball, like 0 energy card that exhausts itself but deals can deal some serious damage. Maybe that's overpowered. It's uncommon, so I feel like they balance it out pretty well, and it exhausts. But I'm a fan. I'm a fan of cards like this. What else? Okay, let's address cannonballs now. So the most conspicuous gimmick, I think, of this class is cannonball supply. And, well, so there are some sources of damage and sources of cannonballs that don't exhaust, and it's Cannon Barrage and Captain's Cabin. Okay? And because of that, both of these are significantly more powerful than these. Cannonball Supply, Double Cannonball, and at least as far as pace is concerned, Infinite Barrage. On that topic, Humongous Cannonball is technically better than the Ironclad's, what's it? The big hammer, 3 damage hammer thing for 30 can upgrade to 40. This is technically better, but I kind of consider this to be a joke. I don't take this very seriously. I think maybe I'm just used to having cannonballs that cost 0, and then I get real ticked off when this one costs 3. Especially since it's about as valuable as 3 cannonballs stacked together, if you have any weapons or what have you. So maybe I'm mistaken about that, actually, but I was really miffed to see a card like this. Okay, where was I? Oh yes, Captain's Cabin. Its upgrade is absurd. Like that. The value here, getting twice the cannonball out of this card and a little block on top for 2 energy. Absurd value. I would make this cannonball upgraded as an upgrade. I wouldn't make 2 cannonballs. That's pretty insane. And Cannon Barrage too. I would upgrade the cannonballs and not just give you free cannonballs by having you get an additional 1. Yeah, I think that's how I'd do it. Also, that's useful for a lot of things. That rewards you for spending a lot of energy on this card. And also, it doesn't make your hands so full that you can't hold all your cannonballs because, you know, it gives you 1 less cannonball. That's a nice thing, I think, a courtesy, since this class has a way of filling its hand, at least as far as I've played. I never pick this ever, because random cards are generally not good. They don't go with your strategy. What else? Double Bottom is pretty interesting of a card. I think it's too good. 10 upgrading to 13 block is pretty darn good because it's a guarantee. But you could argue that it's not often that enemies attack twice or something along those lines. So I guess I'll leave this card alone. Eye patch is interesting. I think it deserves to cost... Okay, 0's fine. This one. Okay, this one. I gotta talk about this one. 10 thorns? I mean, really? Like, that's really high. I mean, thorns are vastly underestimated of an ability, but with multi-hit enemies, they really shine. Maybe the thorns are redundant because with all the resistance you get on this character, multi-hit enemies are never a problem. That might be a reasonable argument, but if you're not considering that, I think this thorn level is pretty high, even for 2 energy. I would have it be maybe 5 thorns and have it upgrade to 7, I think. Yeah, because the higher your total number of thorns, the more value that this card has. And what I mean is that if you can pay more energy for more thorns, that's exponentially better than playing a little energy for a few thorns. What else? This is a waste of time. I think that this class should stick with removing its debuffs more in a dedicated way, since that seems to be what it's doing, instead of giving you artifacts, because artifacts just get lost in the shuffle. They just get absorbed, whereas, you know, they didn't need to be absorbed. You could have just removed all the debuffs after getting them. So this doesn't really work so well. I do want to reiterate, Powder Keg, I think, is basically the foundation of this character. I know it sounds odd, but cheap damage to all enemies. Let's just put it this way: as far as all enemies are concerned, cheap damage is right here. So, provisioning. Okay, I think that's pretty good. I guess it's fine. I wouldn't do anything with it. Okay, I think that's about... I actually appreciate this, by the way. I did want to bring this card up as an example of something I liked. I like the random upgrade mechanic. It's kind of fun to try to get right. It might be annoying for people, I don't know, but it's kind of fun to try to get right. But upgrading this to 6 durability is a bit gratuitous. That's a little bit more value than is reasonable, because you get an extra 2 hits out of it, and you get an extra 2 upgraded cards. That's pretty insane. I'm not going to explain what this card does if you don't already know, because there's bubbles in the way, and I won't be able to do it. So I never ever take this, because there's way better defense to be taking. Okay, so this is the kind of card that deserves to be in the class. Pretty good damage. This is gratuitous, I think, but unupgraded damage is pretty good, and you get some gold out of it. That's the way I think the class wants to be played, so I like that. I really appreciate that. This actually isn't super special. It's great for resistance, but strength is a bit overrated. So as a source of resistance, that makes it good. This disappointed me. I wanted to address these last cards because they had the biggest impressions on me. This disappointed me. So I think that the original... This is... I think the final barrage should not cost 0. I think that the final barrage should be more powerful to reward me for all the cannonballs I spent. So I think that the number should at least be 6 times, upgrading to 8. Yeah, I think that's what I deserve, if I were to play a rare card like this. And for all purposes, make it cost 2. Start it at 8 times the amount of cannonballs. You know, make it formidable. And that, I think, would make it a nicer card. So let's address the percent of gold gained cards. Generally, I consider them good. There are ways to really exploit them. Twice in my runs as the Blackbeard, I ran into the Knowing Skull and just went ham on the riches wishes, so that I could get some extra value out of these cards. So the percentage, I think, is a little bit, like a tad bit low compared to some of the other stuff that this class can do. 5% might be a good default for 3 energy. That's a lot of energy for a single attack. In fact, I mean, that kind of settles it. So there are so many things you can do on 3 energy that will do a lot more damage than this card. I have never found this card worthwhile ever. So I think if you wanna really make this a high roller attack, you should up the percentage of the gold, so make this attack a bit more formidable. I would increase it by at least 2, or you can increase it by nothing, I guess. Don't increase it, and lower the energy cost by 1. I think that would be good. This one actually is pretty good. I think 0.5% of an upgrade is a bit too mean, but I understand the desire to control that very, very carefully. I get that. This is a valuable card because it's a non-depleting source of damage to all enemies, which, you know, the barrel is too, but it's different when you're running on cannonballs and those cannonballs exhaust. So I found myself at least appreciating a solid source of recurring damage. So I definitely do use this card. It's very usable. It's very good. I would up it just a tad. I put it at 3 for a start, and then put it at like 4.5 or 5 as an upgrade. Halberd is the only weapon that I'm willing to take, because you can see that it's got 30 damage already built in and upgrades pretty absurdly. I would do this differently. I would upgrade it to 7 or 8. 8, you know, being pretty generous, in my opinion. What else? Not much more to say about this. It's kind of an absurd source of block, but you know, but it's not super valuable either, because when you stack resistances, who needs block? You don't need block this high. That's what I should say. Mega upgrade is a total waste of time. As I said, you don't really want to be stacking weapons. That doesn't really maximize your attack potential at all, because only one weapon is used at a time, and you can't get to the previous weapon until you've used up the prior one. So I'm not a fan of this at all. I'm gonna save the best for last here. Let's go to the new card, Undead Form. I like it, but it's too gimmicky, because you can remove the debuff no problem. So all you're getting out of this is 2 intangible. Whoop-de-doo. It's not that exciting. And that's what I would want from an Undead Form card. You know, when I was thinking about what this card might be or could be, I thought to myself, you know, this card could be something like, when you take 8 or more damage in a turn, gain 1 intangible on the next turn. Like, that's kind of interesting, and you can put yourself in situations where you might actually want to tap into that on purpose. That, I think, is an entertaining card. Okay. Salvager. Upgraded. It's cheap. so you might actually get your money back, but might is what I mean to emphasize. Um, yeah, don't depend on weapons, as I said before. The Drunken Sailor is absolutely nuts. So being able to use potions in additional time is not a simple thing. It's absolutely broken. So imagine using 2 regen potions at once. Now you have 10 regen, and what's the math on that? I don't think it's math I can do quickly, but 5 plus 4 plus 3 plus 2 plus 1 is like 15 health. So that's 1 regen potion is about 15 health. But 10 plus 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is about 56, 55. I'm not sure if I did it right on my calculator, but 55 health. So being able to use 2 potions, the same potion twice, is exponentially better than being able to use it once. So the Drunken Sailor is an absolutely broken card. I kind of like it, but it needs to cost more. And then it runs into the problem that other cards already cost enough. Like, there's a lot of cards that cost 3. Get rid of the stupid cannonball, I think, in my opinion. Or maybe the guillotine, or the lifeboat or something, to make room for this card if you use it. It's insane. I'm not even sure it should be done. It's way powerful. The parrot I actually really like. I know it's a small variation on the echo form mechanic, but it's a small significant one. And it's got some like card sense to it. Like, I can see why you called it the parrot. I like that. It's way powerful. That's also true. So I'm not really sure what to say about that. But sometimes a class can have way powerful cards. Weapon mastery is ridiculous. So if you're getting card value out of weapon stacking, I think you're doing it wrong. Especially for 2 energy, but it does upgrade to 1. I think that the weapons kind of need to be de-emphasized a little bit. Like, you really can't stack these. It doesn't work like that. Pirate strength gains 6 strength. It's interesting. Maybe this card is the boring card that needs to leave and make room for some other stuff. Because as I said, strength isn't super valuable. Maybe in a long fight, strength will be good, be worthwhile. You have a way better source of strength though, right here. Way better. Costs way less. You lose 4 dexterity and no one cares because you're full of resistance. Okay, so let's get to the coup de grace of this class, literally. But basically, it was the coup de grace to my heart when I first encountered it. So this card definitely made me want to quit and never play this character again. And here's why. Firstly, for a card that's unspeakably annoying, it has awful card art. So it's a boring card. It's a card that you really need to have in your deck, but it's boring. Really boring, in fact. 250 damage is absurdly high for 4 energy, because there's so many ways you can get that 4th energy. There's so many ways. 250 is absurd. You don't have to worry about normal enemies anymore, generally speaking. This card is so good, basically broken. So broken that makes me so upset, because when a card is this broken, you have to have it in your deck all the time. And if you don't have it, like, the loss is palpable, such that you find, if you're doing a high difficult run, that you just keep wishing you'll find this card. That's way not how the class should be played, in my opinion. 250 is overkill, as I mentioned, but the upgrade on this is just childish. 500 damage. They doubled the damage, as if that needed to happen. It's just a ugh, murdered me when I first saw this card. So if you want to make this card work, it needs to cost 5. Period. It's got to cost 5 for a start. The defects Meteor Strike costs 5 and it does 30 damage and then provides lots of energy. And then you need to lower this down to like 100 damage. I'm not kidding. And the upgrade being 150. If this card is going to work. Yeah. Until a change is made to this card, I think I'm not going to continue playing with this class. But okay, so that was pretty negative. But I actually do like this class. There are some things I really like about it, like the Golden Cannonball. Sources of Intangible is kind of cool. Resistance is a very cool mechanic, but also, you know, it gets way out of control on this class. What else? I actually like the weapons. They're cool. The barrel is definitely, that takes the cake for me. That's one of my favorite parts of playing this class for sure. Because it's, you know, an interesting weapon that does some serious damage in a unique way. I also like cannonballs. So, you know, getting the captain's cabin makes me feel great. Having a good source of thorns is cool too. And I like the parrot. It's a great twist on Echo form. It's fun to play. So I think that's plenty of detail on what this class can do to improve. Also, I thought this was funny. Way to go, Cloak and Cannonball. The block isn't bad. Probably should go down to 6 though on the upgraded form. But otherwise, you know, I like it. It's fun. So I think that's plenty said for this class. I hope that all of this is valuable. That this will help the class improve in the end. So thanks for listening.